Every single whisper has the potential to send shockwaves across the financial markets in a world that is characterized by secrecy, policy changes that carry a high degree of risk, and the continuous struggle for dominance that exists between institutions that have long been established and technology that are still emerging. The decisions that will determine the future of currency are made in secret, while the general public is left to speculate on obscure signals and minor changes in tone. The communication that is carried out by regulatory agencies is done in a coded language that is buried within lengthy pronouncements. This leaves analysts and investors in the position of having to decode the actual intents that are behind each and every phrase. The stakes are very high because the interpretation of a single phrase or policy modification can either make or break someone's fortunes. The cryptocurrency community was thrown into a state of complete upheaval and a frenzy of conjecture and argument this week. This turmoil was triggered by a report that arose in the circles of analysts, which was so surprising that it sparked conversations on trading floors as well as on social media platforms. According to the information that is currently available, an allegedly crafted joint statement between the Federal Reserve and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency has been released in this fictitious situation. The document describes an ambitious and revolutionary strategy that involves U.S. institutions obtaining XRP at a fixed rate of $18,356 per token, with the objective of ensuring liquidity for large-scale international trade. This plan has the potential to revolutionize the international financial landscape as we know it. It is an idea that is far too explosive to ever be said publicly. It suggests that there should be a private market mechanism in which participating institutions would be able to acquire a neutral, scalable digital asset at a fixed valuation, which would allow for instantaneous settlement across borders without relying on correspondent banking rails, which are fragile. Even though there has been no release of any official documentation, the mere suggestion of a coordinated framework like this caused shockwaves to ripple through the digital asset channels, suggesting the possibility of a future in which banks do not depend on sluggish legacy systems, but rather on liquidity infrastructure that is powered by blockchain technology. A fabricated image that has been reassembled to look like an internal policy paper is being passed around among private cryptocurrency groups, adding further fuel to the flames. The symbolic seals of both the Federal Reserve and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency seem to be imprinted on it, and each of them is embossed at the top of the page. The purported draft comprises a roster of participating institutions, which includes the names of J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, U.S. Bank, and Citibank. Each of these banks is believed to have reached an agreement to test a simplified settlement pathway that is connected to the XRP ledger. A scenario described in the document is referred to as strategic digital asset liquidity sourcing. This scenario details the projected liquidity requirements for the global market over the course of the next 10 years. Whether this market is actual or recreated, the document appears disturbingly official, complete with classification markings, footnotes, and references to obscure internal divisions. It propagates at a speed that is reminiscent of wildfire, not because people who view it are convinced of its authenticity, but rather because it portrays an image that seems credible in a world in which, quite frankly, blockchain is rapidly getting integrated into the institutional plumbing. As soon as they realize they are in this imaginary universe, the government officials instantly go into public relations lockdown, But in a strange twist of fate, the quiet produces the exact opposite of the intended impact. Instead of soothing things over, it electrifies the entire community. The commentators assert that this degree of radio quiet is out of the ordinary, particularly in situations where narratives have an impact on public markets. The lack of denials, explanations, or even the most fundamental reassurances makes every notion more believable. In the realm of dramatized storytelling, the overwhelming majority of the time, a steadfast refusal to provide any comments on the part of an institution indicates that something of great importance is being prepared behind the scenes. For certain individuals, it is reminiscent of historical occasions in which regulators, long before the fact, were ready for system-wide transformations and made their plans public knowledge. However, at that point, the turning point arises, which alters the narrative from being a sensational rumor to something that is based on actual regulatory precedents. Although the phrase $18,356 buyback makes for an attention-grabbing headline that is ideal for generating enthusiasm, it does not tell the complete story. U.S. banks already have the legal right to use public blockchains such as the XRP ledger for settlement and payment activities, as established by prior OCC rulings. This is the most important point, as well as the one that is actually documented. The doors were opened to banks in order for them to operate on decentralized networks without requiring specific legislation by virtue of this verdict, which was handed down a number of years ago. The imaginary repurchase is a grossly inflated version of a reality that is significantly more intriguing. The infrastructure, regulatory clearance, and technology compatibility required in order for banks to INC corporate digital assets are now available. What truly inspires conjecture in this tale is the fact that the railroads have already been constructed, the road has already been paved, and the legal framework is not the obstacle. It is already quietly in place. The situation becomes more pressing when this imaginary scenario is compared to an actual occurrence that is taking place in the world, specifically the forthcoming annual stress test findings that the Federal Reserve is scheduled to release this coming week. These exams contain, for the first time in history, a category pertaining to the liquidity of digital assets, which serves as an indication that authorities are keeping a closer eye on liquidity channels based on blockchain technology than ever before. Analysts are quick to point out that the emergence of this new scenario category in regulatory talks is unlikely to be the result of mere chance in the context of this fictional plot. There is an unmistakable air of intentionality that surrounds the timing, the context, and the abrupt change in attention, and it would be a mistake to disregard any of these factors. In boardrooms and newsrooms, industry professionals congregate to deliberate over the question of whether this represents a response to unobservable pressures or a preemptive maneuver on the part of regulators who are expecting radical transformations in the financial environment. It has a somewhat similar sensation to that of the last piece of a puzzle falling into the correct position. It seems as if the full form of a complicated riddle that has been in the making for years is finally being made known. The convergence of new rules, market trends, and the quiet of the regulatory authorities gives the impression that everyone is waiting for the next major announcement. At this specific point in time, what is the reasoning behind the implementation of this test? Is it a response to events that have taken place recently, or is it a component of a bigger, well-planned strategy? The timing of the event has caused people to question. Everybody, from regulators to investors, is attempting to piece together the puzzle before the next chapter occurs. The world is watching as markets are reshaped by digital assets. As all of these different elements come together, the story starts to feel like a financial thriller that is unfolding in real time, with a combination of regulatory shadows, evolving technology, and the unstoppable growth of global digital payments. Even though this entire narrative is a work of fictional entertainment, it also reflects a more profound truth. Digital assets are no longer considered fringe. They are increasingly becoming a part of the global financial debate, and the world's monetary system is developing at a fast pace. The significance of XRP reaching the 18,350 SAR mark pales in comparison to the greater transformation that is now taking place. The most important thing to keep in mind is that the future of value, liquidity, and cross-border commerce is being rewritten. In addition, for the first time in decades, the architecture of money itself is shifting. Disclaimer. Before we get into the nitty-gritty details, I would want to emphasize that I do not possess any official credentials in the areas of financial planning or investment management, and I am not a certified financial advisor. The material I share with you is derived from my personal experiences, perspectives, and research, and it is not meant to be interpreted as professional financial advice. The objective of these videos is exclusively for the dissemination of information and the provision of amusement to their viewers. My objective is to provide people with a better understanding of the world of money, investment, and digital assets by sharing ideas, inspiring curiosity, and promoting learning. Nevertheless, it is important to remember that each person has their own unique set of financial circumstances. As a result, a strategy that works for one people might not be appropriate for another. That is the reason that I consistently advise people to carry out their own comprehensive investigation prior to coming to any sort of decision about money. It is essential to seek the guidance of a skilled financial advisor who can provide recommendations that are customized to your own goals and requirements. You should never put your money into anything that you cannot afford to lose, and you should always be careful when you are considering new ventures. I would want to express my sincere gratitude for your willingness to devote your time to viewing and interacting with